Hello, my name is Rachel, and today I'm bringing you my favorites from 2021. So, I've already posted all the books I read in 2021. I read 71 books, and I will leave that video link down below if you want to see everything, but today is all about my favorites of the year, and I'm super excited. I did things a little bit differently this year. Instead of rating books as I went, I just ranked them. So instead of trying to figure out if something was like a 4.5 or a 4, I just placed them where I felt like they fit in the spreadsheet that I had. So like if it was better than this book but not as good as this one, that's where it went. And I really like this format. It makes it really easy to do this type because I already have my top books listed here. So I'm gonna go ahead and do my top 12 books because why not? And then I'm gonna do a few honorable mentions before we get to number 1. So these are in order. We're gonna start with my 12th favorite and work our way up to my very top favorite book of the year. Do you think you know what it is? You might, because I posted about it quite a bit, but I tried to play it cool in my wrap up for 2021 so you wouldn't guess, but you might have guessed anyway. So, starting with number 12, we have The Gilded Ones by Nomina Forna. This book was so good. It kind of took me by surprise. I loved the cover. The cover is absolutely what drew me in originally, but I thought this sounded like something that my book club would like to read at school, so I wanted to read it to make sure it would work, and because they really like fantasy, and I'm not huge with the fantasy, so I expected to like it, but I didn't expect to like it this much. It's so good. Essentially, it's following our main character who is about to partake in her purity ritual, where they have like a bloodletting to make sure your blood is red, meaning you're pure. However, if it's gold, that means you're basically demonic and they are allowed to kill you, which, whoa, that's a lot of, that's a lot right off the top. But of course our main character has gold blood, yada yada. They're trying to kill her, and it turns out that these demonic gold-blooded people basically only have like 1 or 2 true deaths, so they keep trying different ways to kill her and it just doesn't work. She keeps coming back to life, so she's basically being tortured at this point, and somebody shows up and whisks her away to the top part of the government, like the Empire's home base, and she begins training to fight these monsters on the periphery of their empire. And all of this lead up was very interesting. I felt like there were a lot of reveals that I was not expecting, and I just really enjoyed the story. Very heavy-handed with the feminist themes, but I'm here for that. I really liked it, and I think my book club's gonna love it, and I really thought it was fantastic. I look forward to reading the next book in the series that should be coming out this spring, summer time, and super pumped. So that's my number 12 pick. My number 11 pick is 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard. This is an adult thriller, and we read this for book club, and I read this in one day. It was so fast-paced that I just couldn't put it down. The premise of this book is that our 2 main characters meet right before a COVID lockdown and have just kind of started to build a relationship, and they decide to quarantine together. But at the end of 56 days, one of them is dead. And I feel like this had a lot of predictable elements, but then it would like smack you upside the head with something unexpected, so it kept me guessing. It was a lot of fun to read. I really want to look into more things written by this author because I really enjoyed this one a lot. So if you think you can handle a little bit of COVID talk, then definitely pick this up. You do need to know that it is referenced. Obviously, that's kind of the premise of it. But once they get into the lockdown mode, it's not a huge part of the story, but there is one part where they do go out for some like healthy walks, and they round a corner and there's like a COVID station. That was kind of jarring for me. So just know that it does pop up in case you're not wanting to read that, but if you can handle it, it was a very good read. And it was fun to see. I believe this takes place in Ireland, and it was fun to see a different country's kind of trajectory of being locked down compared to the one I experienced. I did think that was interesting. So definitely pick up 56 Days if you think you can handle the COVID-ness. And then number 10 is Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Meninsala. This is the first book in Auntie Tia's Kitchen series. This is a cozy mystery, and it was fantastic. I love our main character's family, and I love her little dog. The whole thing just grew on me. I really enjoyed reading about all the people in this book. Well, you know, except for the people that are annoying. All the main characters I really liked. This follows the story of our main character who has moved back home to help her family run their restaurant, and they're all Filipino heritage, and there's a lot of food and culture and words that are based in a Filipino culture that are mixed in with the story, and I absolutely love that element. It really added something interesting. It took it to like another level for me, at least. And at their restaurant, they have this really horrible food critic that shows up, and you know, he's kind of grumbling and they're feeding him, and then he ends up dying because he got poisoned. And of course it had to happen at their restaurant, so everybody thinks it's them. They have to try to prove that it wasn't to keep the restaurant open. This was just so much fun. I loved pretty much everything about this. The next book is coming out later this month. I think actually probably at the beginning of February, and it's called Homicide and Hollow Hollow. I'm super excited to jump into that, and I really enjoy this. So if you're into cozy mysteries, or you want to try to get into cozy mysteries, I highly suggest Arsenic and Adobo. Number 9 is The Matzo Ball by Jean Metzer. This one was so much fun. This is an adult romance set around the Hanukkah season. Our main character has a disability that really kind of hinders her ability to go out and work like normal hours, so she becomes a writer, and that works really well with her health and her schedule. But she writes Christmas books, very much in the vein of like Hallmark Christmas books, and it's kind of a secret though. She keeps it all sequestered in one room because she comes from a super Jewish family. Her dad is like the head of one of the churches. He's like a big rabbi, and so she kind of keeps this like sequestered because she feels a little bit ashamed, but she loves it. But then lo and behold, her publisher says they don't want another Christmas book from her. They want a Hanukkah book. So she feels very uninspired. She doesn't think Hanukkah has the same magic, so she decides that she needs to go to this big Hanukkah event called the Matzo Ball. But of course, you know who's going to be hosting that event. It's a boy from her past, so she has to, you know, interact with him a lot to try to learn about Hanukkah and get invited to this event. And it's just a really cute, fun romance. I liked a lot of the Jewish culture that was brought in. It just flowed really well, and I enjoyed the characters. I think this was a lot of fun to read. Then at number 8, we have The Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This was the first book in the series, and I had it on my shelf for a long time and just finally managed to pick it up this year. And I kind of regret it. I wish I'd read them as they came out, but this was so good. It follows our main character who decides for her senior thesis she is going to solve a crime. A girl in her town had gone missing, and a boy that she kind of knows peripherally, who she thinks is a really nice guy, it ends up being accused of this crime and then ends up killing himself. So the community thinks it's been solved. He's to blame. End of story. But she does not think so. So she decides to solve the crime for real. She teams up with this boy's brother, and they search for some clues. And I really enjoyed it. I like the elements that made it more of like a research project than just a straight up book. And I am excited to continue on with this series. This is a YA murder mystery. There's 3 books in the series, and all of them are out now. The conclusion was just published, I think, in the last few months. Then at number 7 is kind of a surprise, I have to admit, and that's Winter Counts by David Heska Wanbley Wyden. And the reason it's a surprise is because I picked this specifically because I wanted to read native authors in the month of November. So I picked this for our book club because we tend to like mysteries, and I heard it's a good one. So that's why we read it. I just wasn't expecting to like it as much because it is revolved around a vigilante. Essentially, our main character is a vigilante for hire because living on a reservation, the tribal council and the FBI just aren't really able to handle a lot of the crime because of this, that, and the other. So he becomes a vigilante for hire to take care of some of these issues, and then basically just things just blow out of control. It's kind of slow paced. It's not like high action, but in the sequences that there is a lot of action, it gets intense. There's some gore included, so be aware of that. There's some depiction of death of children. There's a lot of trigger warnings for this book, but it was so good. It was so interesting, and like I said, I wasn't expecting expecting to like this as much as I did because I just didn't like the idea of reading about a vigilante. In the first couple chapters, our main character Virgil seems just really grumpy, and I just couldn't relate to him. But as you carry on through the book, you really come to like really understand him and side with him and feel for him and really appreciate him as a character. So I really like this one. I would highly recommend it, especially if you're looking for native voices. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing this as a series. I'd like to read more about our main character. Number 6 is also a surprise because I like reading nonfiction, but it's usually not my favorite. My favorites usually end up being fiction. And I have 2 nonfiction books to tell you, actually 3 nonfiction books to tell you about in my top 12. And that's kind of surprising. But this one's called Spook Science Tackles the Afterlife by Mary Roach. This is the first Mary Roach that I read, and I really liked it. It's an adult nonfiction book, as I said, and it's exactly what it sounds like. She is following the science behind the research of afterlives. So each essay is like a different look of how people are trying to prove there's an afterlife scientifically. And it does really feel like you're following along on the journey with her because she doesn't know all these answers. She's not a scientist per se. She doesn't do all this research herself, but she's following along with people who do the research and then it kind of explaining it to you. I really enjoyed this. I thought this was fascinating. There were so many interesting elements to this. I feel like this was one of those books that every couple of chapters I would put it down and be like, did you know this? And everybody hates hearing about it by the end, but it's just so fascinating that you want to share it with everybody. So I'm very much looking forward to reading more Mary Roach in the future. Would highly recommend Spook Science Tackles the Afterlife if you are so interested. Number 5 is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. And this one is definitely at the number 5 spot, not necessarily for the writing or the plot, but for the enjoyment. I was in a bit of a slump when I picked this up, and I really enjoyed the experience. This is an adult mystery that follows our main character who is called to the university where her niece is attending because there is a murder, and then another murder takes place, and it's in this academic setting, and they're trying to figure out who's at fault, and there's this really creepy teacher that has like a cult going, and it was just bonkers, but I just enjoyed reading it so much that it had to be in the top for me because the reading experience for this was so amazing, and I absolutely loved the callback to his first book, The Silent Patient. I was reading this and I literally was like, oh my gosh! But I think it was just a lot of fun to read. There are definitely some problems, I think, with the plot, with the characters, etc. But I just had such a fun reading experience that I think it deserves to be this high on my list. Number 4 is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kimmerer. I really enjoyed this book. I think one of my favorite elements is our main character, Harper. If you don't know, this story is a YA fantasy retelling of Beauty and the Beast. It basically features a boy who is reliving, a prince, if you will, who's reliving the fall season over and over until he can find somebody who loves him. And it turns really bad for most of these people. And she's the newest one that has been brought to try to fall in love with him. She's snatched from like our world and brought into this fantasy element. And she has a disability. And I love how the disability is presented and not left on the back burner. I feel like I see that sometimes. They take something, they want to have a disability rep, but they don't want to have to deal with the difficulties that come with that, so they mention it and then that's all you hear about it. I felt like this was present, and it showed up multiple times. Our character had to deal with this disability throughout the story, but it did not stop her. She just seemed like such a strong character, and I just really enjoyed it. I thought this was fantastic, and I hope to finish the final 2 books in the series. They're both out already, and I really enjoyed this one. I look forward to it, but I do think that while this series is finished, there is going to be another book that takes place in this world, so kind of like a spin-off series that's coming in the future. But I really liked it. I highly recommend if you're looking for a YA fantasy and you haven't read A Curse So Dark and Lonely to go ahead and read that one. Number 3 is a huge surprise for me, and that's Gry Details, Adventures from the Dark Side of Science by Erica Engelhaupt. She is a writer for National Geographic, and I am not super like scientifically minded, but I loved this book. Now, it is exactly what the title says, gory. So if you have a weak stomach, do not read this. But basically every chapter follows some different gory thing and like the science behind it, and it was so fascinating. This is another one where I kept going like, oh my gosh, did you know this? And this time people were like, shut up, that's gross. But it was so fun. I really enjoyed this. So like the first one started with like crime scene nutshells that they still use today to train people, so not super gory, but it does talk about, you know, crime scenes in general, so that kind of gore. One of the essays talks about how we should all be eating bugs to make food more sustainable, to make everything more sustainable for our environment and our living experience. One is about pets that turn and eat their owners after they die and why they do that. So it definitely gets gory, so I want to warn you. But if you can handle that level of gore, it was so interesting. Like the reasons why things were there, the way she interviewed people about this, the questions she came up with as a journalist to ask them, I just thought it was fantastic. Would absolutely recommend, again, if you have the stomach for it. Number 2, I feel like should not be any surprise because I have been recommending this book to anybody who will listen this year, and that is Pride and Premeditation by Tirzah Price. This is a YA historical mystery reimagining of Pride and Prejudice. So essentially we have all of the same characters that we do in Pride and Prejudice, but instead of following the events of Pride and Prejudice, they're all interacting in a murder investigation. And it is so amazing. I absolutely loved it. I typically don't like Pride and Prejudice retellings because they don't feel like I feel the same about the characters. I just don't like the characters as much in a lot of the retellings, and that's part of why I love Pride and Prejudice. I love some of those characters so much, and when they do the retellings, they just mess it up. But here, I feel like they were, for the most part, preserved as how they were, because it's still set historically. But you get the fire, you get the hate to love, you get all of it, but you also get a murder mystery, which, I mean, how could you not like that? I highly suggest this one if you like Pride and Prejudice, if you like historical mysteries, etc. Read this book. It was so good. The second book in the series is coming out later this year, I think in this first half, and it's called Sense and Second Degree Murder. It's going to be, I think, similarly done with Sense and Sensibility, and I am so excited. There's going to be, I think they've already announced the third one, but I think she's going to do all of the books written by Jane Austen, and the third one is, I think, Manslaughter Park or something. Like, I love the titles, I love the concept, I am on board with this. Now, I don't know how Sense and Sensibility is going to go because I haven't read Sense and Sensibility, so I think I'll have a different perspective having not read the source material. Like with this one, I know the Pride and Prejudice story in and out, so I feel like I really thoroughly enjoy the story, so we'll see how I enjoy Sense and Sensibility without the experience of reading the source material first. We're getting ready to head into my number 1 book, so I wanted to go ahead and give you some honorable mentions. This is going to be like super quick. I just want to give you some honorable mentions that almost made it into my top 12 before we move on to number 1. First up is The Final Girls Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I really enjoyed this. I love how he does truly scary, but also mixes in a lot of campy. It's a lot of fun. So I would recommend The Final Girls Support Group. I also really enjoyed The Death of Mrs. Westaway by Ruth Ware, and a very similar plot line. I really enjoyed The Inheritance Games. Both of them feature a girl who comes into an unexpected inheritance and then the fallout from that. And I really enjoyed the Truly Devious series this year. I definitely loved it. Oh, so good. And I hope to read the 4th book in the series soon. And then my final honorable mention is Oddball by Sarah Anderson. I just love her comics. I think they're so relatable and so funny. And if you have not read one of the Sarah Scribbles books, you need to. And if you're not willing to read the book, then check her out on Instagram. A hoot. A true delight. So, with those honorable mentions in, now let's head to number 1. Do you know what it's going to be? I feel like you should know because I anticipated this before the year even started, to be perfectly honest. And it is, of course, it's Phoebe Robinson, y'all. Of course it's going to be. Her book is called Please Don't Sit on My Bed with Your Outside Clothes, which I feel like that title alone should make it win for the year. But it's a hoot. I love Phoebe Robinson's voice. It's smart, but funny and silly and relatable, and it's just fun to read. I can see how she might not be for everybody because she does use like very millennial terms, a lot of pop culture references, and basically makes up her own language as she goes. But I think she has a lot of interesting points that she makes. She has a lot of different thoughts that make me think, and I think she presents information in a fun, accessible way, and I think this would be a great book to read for a book club or just by yourself. I read an advanced copy of this. I was so glad to get it. I haven't listened to the audiobook yet, so I will be rereading this year in the audiobook format, which I can already guarantee you is going to be amazing. But either way, I highly, highly, highly suggest you read this. I love Phoebe Robinson's books. This is the third one she's written and the third one that I've read, and I would say that this is probably my favorite. Every time I say that, but they just keep getting better and better, and I will immediately be reading Phoebe Robinson from now on. Every essay collection I've read by her has been just fantastic, so she's officially like auto-buy author, and I just loved it. So, so, so good. And there you have my top favorite books of 2021. Have you read any of these? Are you influenced to read them now that you've heard me talk about them? What were some of your favorites from 2021? Let's talk favorite books down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye!